Hey, Storm fans, welcome to episode 4 of the Let's Go Storm podcast for the 23-24 season. As usual, I'm here with Rish and Mike and our special guest, playoff winning head coach, Mark Clark. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
So we're going to have a normal kind of format to our normal ones. We're going to find out a bit more about Mark into basketball and what he's done in basketball, and then his journey at Storm, plus the big news that he's staying on for a second season next season. So, Mark, can you tell us a bit about how you got into basketball to start with?
I think the first part was not too unusual, as in being relatively tall. School was always was quite a sporty school, etc. But it wasn't really my first choice. I was a goalkeeper in football, and then I rowed extensively. But I went to Borough Road College and ended up with guys like Paul Stimpson and Mick Bett, and began to take basketball, pretty very seriously then. Got into coaching really quickly, and was fortunate that through Paul and Mick and a number of other people got asked to go down to Crystal Palace and become, well, in the first instance, I had the chance to work out with the team, but more interestingly for me, I had the opportunity to get involved coaching, and so quickly ended up coaching the junior programs at Crystal Palace. And then I like to, I'll word it in the way that I was right place, right time, in the sense that a number of things happened on the women's side, and I ended up head coaching the women's team halfway through the 1984 season, which is a long time ago now. But then in the second season as head coach, we made a pretty dramatic decision. We went all English with no imports, and ended up winning all 4 trophies, including the World Invitational at Crystal Palace. So, and that just, I got exposed to a number of things very quickly. Had great opportunities to coach in Northampton and Brixton with some of the best women's programs, and then became the women's head coach with England, and I was an assistant on a GB team, and did that for quite a while, but wasn't able then to coach in the women's game. So my association with Hertfordshire started then, because I ended up working in Division 1 men at Ware Rebels, and that was my first encounter with the Darlow family, as in Steve was on the team, and with the Burnells, because JB was on the team. So did about 3 or 4 years in Ware, had a great time there, and then ended up in the BBL with the London Leopards. So I was Billy Mims' assistant when we won the championships and the cups, and then went for a scenario of a number of different roles, and ended up back at Ware, and then ran and started off and initiated the Barking Abbey Academy, because at the same time as I was doing all that, my son ended up in Madrid when he was 14 on the pro team academy. That process was interesting in the sense that, we visited Real Madrid, Estudiantes, a number of clubs in Germany, and seeing those situations was a bit of an eye-opener, and nothing like that in the UK. So that was what we tried to do in setting up in Barking, and then increase the connection with Hertfordshire, because Lloyd Gardner, who's now the head coach at Surrey, had come through the Worst system. He worked with me at Barking for around 12 to 15 years when we set that up. And at the end of that, after the women were playing in the WBBL, Lions became what Lions is now, and head coached the women's team there for a while, for 3 seasons, and then started to advise Lions across the board. And at the same time as that, JB and Tony asked me if I would be interested in coaching at Hemel, and that was a pretty much of a no-brainer, the way John and Tony described it to me. So that in 5 minutes is 30 odd 40 years of basketball. So I think I've been pretty fortunate in the sense that got to professional basketball very quickly, and then because of largely through Dan and to an extent through Ella, my daughter, got exposed to some pretty serious coaching scenarios and professional basketball across Europe, which is on a different level than it is still in the UK, although we're catching up. And I think that the biggest thing on that is that my expectations whenever I was involved in national teams, etc., and when I was the performance director of Great Britain's national team, weren't restricted at all. They were pretty much set on how I've seen things in Europe, and that's what I wanted to try and put on the floor here. And I've carried on some of those principles, albeit in a slightly limited ways, in the first year at Storm.
So were you still playing when you started coaching?
I was only playing. I played British colleges, and I got to a point at 21, 22 where Danny Palmer was the head coach at Crystal Palace, and as a teacher of the game, Danny Palmer's right up there with the best. And so there was an opportunity. Like, did I want to try and play more? And I was fairly realistic about the level I could have played at, and for the length. But I always got a buzz out of coaching. So when I had the opportunity, I was already coaching the women's team at college. And it became a relatively straightforward decision. Did I want to play and enjoy it? I could still carry on playing for fun, for want of a better phrase, which I did, but primarily from about the age of 21, 22, coaching was the direction that I focused on.
Okay.
So I mean, you touched on when you were saying about the summary of your career and seeing some of the things in Europe and Madrid, and obviously we all know watching NBA where some of the players that have come through Madrid and where they are now. Was it frustrating seeing how good the setup was there and then coming back to England, still seeing it growing and still maturing, or was it still growing at a respectable rate to?
I think our systems disadvantaged our talented players in the sense that when Dan went to Madrid, he was okay. They were great in the way they looked after him from a young boy's perspective. The education system he went through was excellent, provided by them. But he was on the floor 6 days a week. So he'd have workouts as well as team practice. He'd have all the physical training support. And here we were trying to find 2 to 3 practice sessions a week. So every single week, kids in this country were losing 10 hours on guys in Europe. And that was not just in the top clubs, just generally. So they were having to find different places to practice. They were probably having to practice in the evenings alongside doing school stuff. And that was one of the big motivating factors to try and set up like the Barking Abbey situation. I also spent some time at the Sabonis school in Lithuania, where the education and the workout and the basketball was all integrated. Therefore, kids were finishing at 6 o'clock in the evening, whereas our kids were only starting to practice at 6 o'clock in the evening if they were lucky. So that's literally what we tried to replicate at Barking, and that's because primarily we wanted to give talented kids, and there's a bunch of talented kids. I mean, we took kids from all over the country, and we ended up taking kids from other parts of Europe, but giving them those hours on the court gave them a chance. Still down to them, still down to how hard they worked, but we were giving them the chance to put the hours in. So hopefully then be on a level playing field when they were playing for the national team or they were trying to develop professional careers. And I think at Barking, when I left, I think we'd sent something in the region of 130 players on scholarship to the States, and I think we were close to 40 players playing full-time professionally across Europe as well as in the BBL. So from a perspective of did we achieve what we wanted to do? Yeah, I think we did. But largely because when the kids were given those opportunities, those kids took them. And we had some great coaches. As I said, I mentioned Lloyd Gardner. We had some other great coaches. And that was the biggest thing, giving kids hours on the court.
Yeah, so it's one thing obviously they do in Europe a lot, and obviously it's nice to see. And we all know the success that has come from what you started at Barking, and I think
Mm.
even Jack and Veron came through there as well to name some Hemel players as well. So
Yeah.
it's talented history.
No, and it's one of the reasons I think that to be brutally honest about it, it's why there's a part of me that wants Jack and Veron to do beyond just coaching and wanting to do well for the team. I've seen them work very hard as kids, and trying to make it as a pro in whatever division in this country and potentially elsewhere is like a big buzz for me.
That's awesome.
Cool. Like that.
Hats off to Tony and John for taking a risk on a coach with such a small amount of experience, Mark.
Works both ways though, because John in particular knew both sides. So
yeah. Fair enough. That's a really interesting journey though. The like for the academy side of things. Where do you think we are now, like as a nation against like our European competitors?
I think it's very difficult to measure because there's so many variables. But if I think around 5 years ago, that would put us in 2019, 2018. Yeah, but from the 5-6 years ago, when I was the performance director at British Basketball, we had 4 teams in the A division of the age group European Championships, and they were maintaining their status. So they didn't just get there and go straight down. The under 18s with Alan Keane as their head coach maintained their status. Andreas and Mark Studel and Lloyd again with the under 20s, again they maintained their A division status, and they, because of the way European basketball was and is, they were having to beat Russia and teams at that level to get into the A division or retain their status. And as a measure at that point, I think not just Barking but a number of academies had done a great job producing players that not only then did well in their age group championships, but then went on and got very good college opportunities in the States, or went straight into pro situations in Europe. So I think about 6 years ago or so, I think that there was the academy system was working really well. Give some credit to Warwick Khan when he was responsible for that within BE. I think it's gone down in the wrong direction over the last 5 to 6 years. It's been watered down. There's possibly too many academies, and I think that if you look at Europe in particular in terms of the way where it's successful, and Germany is a case in point, where it's successful, all the development is enabled, so to speak, or facilitated by the federation, but delivered by the clubs. And that's not just the BBL level clubs, but like clubs like Hemel, clubs like Derby, clubs that have got solid foundations and great and very, very, very good coaches. They can do the delivery on the ground, which I don't think federations can ever do. And I think I would hope, if you look at the BBL at the moment, there's more British players at times, and I think most of the teams, Caledonia and Lions, in many ways are trying to identify British talent, and I think that's only going to be good. But I think 6 years ago, I thought the talent stream coming through academies was starting to be comparable in Europe, to such an extent that we had an invitation to go to the Lithuanian embassy because a Lithuanian boy had come from Lithuania to come to Barking, and it's such a big deal in Lithuania that we got an invite from the ambassador to come, and I think they were trying to find out why one of their better players would want to come to the UK. It was primarily because he wanted to go to college in the States and felt he needed to improve his English, but there was a basketball situation that they recognized as, well, we might be able to work with these guys, and that was an interesting eye-opener as well. I think it's been watered down over the last 5 or 6 years. I think you look at, I know that people will then say, oh yeah, COVID, but the rest of Europe had COVID as well. But there's possibly the best coaches are working within the BBL and within Division 1. There are some coaches in the junior ranks that are doing a good job, but the best coaches are primarily in the BBL and Division 1, and those are the coaches that they need on the national team, and those coaches need to be influencing academies, and they're not directly doing that as they used to. And I suppose the icing on the cake was then a senior team that had a number of players that had been through Barking and other institutions on the academies. On the women's side, they came fourth in Europe, and the men have always qualified for finals. So the last men's team that played in the qualifiers in February, a third of the team were from Barking, and then two other kids were from one was from Charnwood, and another, so like half the team had gone through the academy system. So we were doing something right, and I think that there's a number of academy coaches that are as frustrated as I am about the way it's been a little bit watered down.
When you say watered down, you mean there's too many academies now?
Possibly too many, and I think there's not enough integration with the clubs, because the clubs have both resources and players, and more importantly, they have coaches.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you look at it from a very junior level, often you find that there's not that many opportunities to even play for kids as well. So I think there's a balance between having more opportunity to play and then having the right structure in place to
absolutely. And it's because if the structure's right, the players will gravitate to the better clubs anyway, because they'll want to. I mentioned being at Crystal Palace at the time. I was at Crystal Palace. If it wasn't Crystal Palace, kids went to Kingston, and then after that, if they're in London, were they going to want to go and play with Towers with Joe White, or they were going to go and play with Hunt Flong at East London. So the better players will go to the better programs, so they've just got to be facilitated in doing that. And there's plenty of examples. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And is that a similar picture for men's and women's basketball?
I think the numbers. There's obviously more boys, and there's obviously a greater depth, but the scenario's the same. Yeah, I mean, Holly Winterburn went through the scenario at Charnwood, and after some really great work that they did when she grew up in Northampton, and then there's other players, but Holly's the latest. But on that, Shanice Norton went through Barking, so Savannah Wilkinson went through Barking. It's like it's the same scenario. You can see that era, if you want. I mean, Barking, under the name of Kent Crusaders, won the Division 1 playoffs with basically one American and 11 under 19s as such. Yeah. So that was a really good period, because the best players were only in like half a dozen or so academies. So I think that's it's the balance between trying to give everybody an opportunity, but then when there's talent, giving that talent as much of an opportunity as well, because otherwise I think the talent is under supported. And
they've got to have the pathways, right?
It's got to work for both. If you don't have the base and the growth grassroots, then the kids aren't getting introduced to the game. But then you've got to take them somewhere. Otherwise they end up either moving to another sport or missing out on some really crucial years of development.
Yeah. No, fascinating.
Can you tell us a bit more about your time as head coach of the Great Britain women's squad?
I would say it's possibly or probably, but definitely the proudest national team experience, because we took the program from zero to the A division, setting up a program in a very short period of time. And then at that stage, it was a 2-year cycle to qualify. But setting up that initial and the foundations that we put in place was one, exciting, but two, like the pressure was fairly intense. But again, in the first few years in particular, we had great staff. If you have great staff and you have great people on your roster, then it's the challenges is where it should be, which is on the court. And we were lucky with the fact that Joe Leedham was on that group, and a number like Azania Stewart, a number of players that had really good pedigrees and backgrounds, but also had great mentality. So I was disappointed to not be coaching in 2012, but who wouldn't be? But proud of what we achieved, because there was that much pressure that, you know, FIBA had said you have to get to the A division if you want to get the place in 2012, because there was no guarantee. And I think both Chris Finch with the men had some huge moments where they made shots, you know, to sort of win games that would have meant if they didn't, they wouldn't have been promoted. And I think in some ways, both male and female wise, we missed out on making the most of 2012. But that's been so, you know, well documented, and lots of people have moaned about, you know, the missed opportunity. But it's a complex set of circumstances. But no, you can't. The proudest thing you can ever do is coach your country. So,
yeah.
or your country. So it was an enormous. I mean, that and coaching the England national team when we won the Commonwealth Championships, and being involved as assistant coaches on those programs as well. You can't think of anything that's a bigger deal in a sort of a professional sport capacity.
Yeah, it must have been a great feeling leading out teams you've been. I mean, apart from some of the things you mentioned there, is there a particular highlight about your time there that really sticks in your mind at all?
Well, we won the in 19. See, I have to go back on. There are two things. We won in 1991. The Commonwealth Basketball Championships wasn't part of the Commonwealth Games, but there was still the Commonwealth Championships, and that's the only time England's ever won a senior national team competition, and it was in Scotland, so it was close to being at home as you can. Winning that was phenomenal. For your country to have its national anthem played when you've won a championship is special. And then also getting promotion to the A division, because we went completely unbeaten to get in that second qualification year. So wins in we literally kept the Dutch to under 40 points at home, which really meant the second leg of the qualifying was a done deal. But victories over Bosnia and people like that for Great Britain, you have to experience that stuff to know how big a deal it is, and also feel the pressure of feeling you're literally trying to win for your country is pretty intense.
Fair play. It's definitely a proud moment, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you mentioned unbeaten run there as well. Obviously, you're no stranger to an unbeaten run. If we fast forward to London Lions, and I think it was a 51 game unbeaten streak.
Yeah.
I think you only lost one game at London Lions in your time there, didn't you? I think.
No, in the first year, which was the COVID year, when it was the first year we'd set it up with the support of Lions properly. We won the championship and won the trophy, but we lost in the semi-final of the cup, and I think we'd lost 3 games in the league. But after that, we didn't lose a game in the. I didn't lose until moving upstairs, if that's the right description, to advise the club across the board. So yeah, I mean. That's an interesting, because I think the first year we did it, when Joe Leadham joined us, was special, because we had a lot of London-based British players on the roster, with some real quality sort of foreign players as well. And that was the year that, you know, we made the quarterfinal, we made the playoffs in the Europe Cup, and, you know, budget-wise, we were probably one of the lower budgeted teams in that competition. But to beat Bourges, who won the competition that year, was. At home was a pretty special thing. It was a really special thing for Joe Leadham, and having Joe Leadham on the team in her final year, and it was a first opportunity to play pro in the UK. I mean, it was a special year for her, and because it was a special year for her, it was a special year for everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of success with that London Lions team. I think if you look at recent times of them just winning the European Cup as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a shame with people like, I think I've read somewhere that Holly Winterman, because London Lions aren't going to be in it next year, she might actually go to Besiktas, or she has gone, something like that. And it must be frustrating to see what you built, to see where they've gone now, and then potentially it will come back down again.
Well, it is frustrating in some ways, but what they've done, and what the Lions men have done, in the same way that if you go back when London Towers were playing in Europe years ago, and Crystal Palace were like winning in years ago. I mean, Crystal Palace beat Real Madrid in a quarter-final of the European Cup in the first leg. I mean, got beaten quite heavily in the second leg. But what it does is it raised the bar and the aspiration. So there's a setback in that Lions are pulling the sort of plug, if you want, financially on that. But Caledonia are still going to be playing in Europe next year, I hope. And yeah, there's a budgetary side to it in terms of, in the last year in particular, this last season, Lions did have really heavily fund that roster. But if Holly Winterburn and Shanice Norton, people like that can play at that level, then why can't other British kids? And in the same way that, you know, Luke Nelson's out there on the floor with the men and being a major part of everything. You know, and Gabe Olaseni is an East London boy, and he's just a great advert. If Gabe can do it, you know, and Gabe got turned down by Business Story, but Gabe didn't get a spot at Barking Abbey when he was 16. He was only about 6'5" when he came, but he grew 5 inches in the next year. So, and Gabe will tell you this story. He didn't then mope on that. You know, he used that as a motivation and went away and worked really, really hard. And now, you know, he's one of the best big men in Europe, and he's a major part of the British national team. So, if he can do it, and that what it does is it gives everybody the opportunity that they think they can do it.
No, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Puts a bit of a positive spin on what some people are frustrated by. But yeah, I see your point on that. The building could come back stronger than what they are now. Yeah,
well, that's what they say, and I can't. You got to hope that they can do that. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like you guys know, and everybody at Hemel knows how hard it is to run clubs. You know, and how you can finance clubs. It's really hard. And okay, Lions have had a few years of significant funding on the women's side. They're maintaining the funding on the men's side, and their aspiration is to grow the women's team up in a more sustainable way. So that it makes them like everybody else. You know, everyone else has got to put the hard miles in off the court, which is it's unbelievable what some clubs do. Quite phenomenal.
Yeah, it's got to be sustainable. Sorry.
No, sorry, Rish. Go on.
No, that's it. That was just...
I know when you were announced as Storm coach, Mark, that it said you were going to continue your kind of advisory role with the Lions. Are you still doing that?
No, I stopped doing that in March. They were going through as much documented, like trying to draw back their budgets, etc. And we had a conversation that part of reducing that would have been reducing the amount of money spent on. If you're going to start taking away like some full-time staff, to have someone advising you is possibly a luxury that they decided was a luxury that they didn't want to spend the money on anymore. I 100% get that, and I'm never short of people asking me to do things. So like I'm more than happy where I am coaching wise, and I'm more than happy with some of the projects I'm working on with some other BBL teams, and with the WBBL, because I'm still on the board of the WBBL, because I still think the league could be a really good product. So yeah, maybe Lions made the decision, as lots of people make a decision that wasn't about, as they did with a number of people and a number of things, like the whole budget for the women's team. So proportionally, I'd have been quite a chunk of budget that they got left if they'd have carried on. So I understand it.
Is it? And obviously, you spent a lot of your coaching time coaching the women's game. Is that just kind of how it fell for you, or is there?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, the opportunity to coach at Crystal Palace at the time was an opportunity I don't think anyone would have turned down. I don't find it, and I don't look at it that differently in terms of coaching, you know, men or women. They've all got their own personalities. Maybe there's more similar types in either sport, but in either side of the sport. But I've been fortunate. I've always worked with really high-level basketball players, whether they be juniors or seniors. So, but yeah, coaching journey, as the cliche says, was initially into the women's game, and then there was and then I went into the BBL with Leopards. So, and then I was at Ware with men. So it's actually closer to a 50-50 split. And then obviously a chunk of time, 15 years, was at Barking. So I wouldn't initially. Definitely, it was much more of a female side to the game, but from the mid-90s onwards, it was pretty much, I'd say, almost be a 50-50 split. Obviously, more time national team wise was with the women's game.
Yeah. Any more questions from you, Mike?
I suppose we did have a fan question centered around the men and women game in particular. Obviously, with you coaching on both sides, I think there's a quite documented now with football and how the men and women's game are starting to get level. Is there much difference in the men and women's game at the moment? Do you think there's going to be a time where they are neck and neck, particularly, or?
Well, physicality wise, they're never going to be the same. Skill level wise, I would say that there's no different skill sets in terms of different individual players. I think that if people are fortunate enough to watch EuroLeague women basketball or WNBA basketball, it's a great level of basketball. There are the game's not played above the ring as much as the men's games are played above the ring, but apart from that, the skill sets, I mean, you only have to look at, the great hype around Caitlin Clark to know how good they're basketball players at the end of the day. And in the UK, there are just more male basketball players than female basketball players. I think that if you were going to, there was the best basketball player I've ever coached is a female, and some of the best basketball players I've coached have been females, but some of the best young players I've coached have been males. So I would always answer that question with that they're all high level basketball players that use their physical attributes, whatever they are. The men's game is commercially so much more advanced than the women's game at the moment, but that's the same in every other sport. So hopefully that gap's getting smaller and there'll be more commercial opportunities on the female side of the game. Well, look at Hemel. Hemel's 1 year of a team playing in the women's Division 2.
Yeah.
I'm sure with the people running, absolutely coaching on that program, that program will be a Division 1 program before long, and who knows, there might be a WBBL program there, because the catchment area for players in Hertfordshire and North London is significant. So there's no reason that the aspirations shouldn't be that high.
It'd be great to see either a men or women's team from Hemel in the BBL would be, we spoke about it for men for years, obviously women just coming on the scenes, but that'd be some achievement if we could get there.
Well, there's so much history though, isn't there, in Hemel? It's been one of the founder members of pro basketball, go back in the day, and it's still, I mean, that's why there are 800-900 people watching games on Saturday nights, because there's a tradition of watching basketball in Hemel, and Hemel has that tradition. It's got things that other clubs would die for.
You think, was that one of the things that maybe, obviously apart from your connections with the Darlows and Burnells, is that something that potentially draw you in, knowing the history and the fan base that Storm has?
Well, it definitely gets you through the door, doesn't it? It gets you through the door in terms of thinking. Obviously, they were coming off a hugely successful season the year before, and they had been a successful Division 1 team for a while. But I think the biggest thing was that, from what I knew, apart from all the tradition stuff, was that I was going to go into a situation where I just had to coach. And okay, I mean, Tony and John, we have various conversations about various things about basketball, but primarily I just have to plan basketball sessions and look about how the team can do, and recruiting, replacing players and everything else. It's all around the basketball. There are so many other Division 1 teams where you see coaches having to drive the bus. It's a cliche, but it's true. and that's not what Division 1 basketball should be about. It should be, it says it's a professional league. It should be a professional league. And one of the attractions of Hemel was that it's as professional as you can get at Division 1 level in terms of the things that people have to do. So there's not many coaching jobs in Division 1 where you just have to coach, and that's what Hemel provides the opportunity to do.
That's a really good point. The organisation is so well structured, isn't it, at Hemel? And they've got such a great sort of community working around everything.
And I mean that phrase of like other clubs would die for that. I mean, I know it's sometimes more difficult in bigger cities, etc., but some of the big city teams in the BBL don't have that, and they have to work harder in a different way to get that. You know, even Manchester, who should have that, don't have that. That sort of they shouldn't be reliant on volunteers, because I think that almost doesn't respect the volunteer enough to just like, oh yeah, they'll do it, etc. But to have the base of people that Hemel have doing all aspects of the club is, as I say, what most clubs would die for.
Yeah.
So you talked about speaking to Tony and JB. How did you come into Storm come about then? Did one of them pick the phone up to you when they realised they needed a new head coach? Or
well, I mean, initially they JB and Tony had asked me to. Mike Penning was the chair of the All Parliamentary Group on Basketball, which when he got in that role and they asked me to advise them, that was quite an exciting opportunity. COVID got in the way. I mean, most of the time that Mike has been the chair. So I hadn't met Tony in any way until working on that All Parliamentary Group. So when they said, "Oh, look, we need a coach for next year," and John asked, "Would I be interested in doing it?" It was almost an easy ask because we already had developed a relationship through that All Parliamentary Group. Yeah, I was surprised when they asked me, because it's not very often that a coach doesn't want to carry on coaching after having an unbeaten season and winning everything. Know Drew really well, great guy and a really good coach. So I was surprised. Yeah, the only debate was, 2 practices a week is tough. It's tough to get as much done as you want to get done, but we've got a good group of people, so we make the most out of the 2 practices a week. So yeah, it largely sort of to an extent fell out of the All Parliamentary Group, where they asked me to advise them. So that obviously I knew John anyway, but having a more detailed conversation about an opportunity in Hemel came out of that.
Is that
So
group still going? Sorry, Mike,
sorry.
is that All Parliamentary Group still?
Well, there is an All Parliamentary Group that runs that's been there for a number of years now. It's been 2 previous chairs that I'm aware of that both really. Unfortunately, what it's had to do in the past is like sort of lobby for funding or whatever else and stuff. But we've gone beyond that, and I think there was an opportunity for the group to function. But as I say, COVID got in the way. But it's one of those mechanisms that basketball could use better than it does, and Mike would have been an ideal person to chair that. In the past, the BBL, in particular, Kevin Routledge at Leicester and Paul Blake, and it was chaired initially by the MP from Newcastle, and that was a really, really productive sort of body where you've got a way to try and influence like the Department of Cultural Media and Sport, and trying to hold people to accountable, being accountable for what they're doing, etc. So it should be and can be a really effective group. And unfortunately, obviously, Mike's stepping down as an MP, but I think that that group could, and in particular for the England Basketball League and the stuff for England Basketball is a group that can be really, because every BBL team, for example, will ensure that their MP is aware of it. So it's another way of sort of trying to tap into the processes that are available.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Nice, yeah.
the Sky cameras being at the Storm Dome just after that was happening in Parliament. It's like, it was weird. They were interviewing some of the volunteers and the referees and stuff.
Always weird that they're interviewing referees. But
Yeah, we won't ask you your thoughts on referees, Mark. We'll leave that one alone.
no, you can definitely ask me my views on referees. I think that it's the same as players, right? We've had some great referees this year, and Edvard Judansky is a great referee, and even a veteran like John they're very good referees. It's just there's an inconsistency that is like every other part of the sport. If you don't invest in it and you don't give them the opportunities, they don't get any better. But we've been quite lucky this year. There's only been a couple of games where I think we've had some issues. Obviously, the Essex game in the league was an interesting one that referees allowed to get out of hand. But no, I think much maligned referees, and I'll be one of those people who maligns them. But I think we've got some great ones. We just don't have enough of them.
Yeah, great. And it's one of those you can't play the game without them. And yeah, they do a tough job. So they're the first line of abuse, I suppose, from some areas. But it's you can't play it without them.
No, but they need to work as hard as the players do at getting better.
Absolutely.
So obviously,
I mean,
Mike.
if you go back to obviously Storm and you mentioned Drew there, Drew quite well, and you were surprised to see him step down. Another question we had from one of the fans that we put out there was, did you feel any, despite your experience, did you feel any added pressure and expectations coming in off the back of a 41-0 season, or was that not something you'd even thought about?
Well, anyone who says they haven't thought about it is definitely lying to you. But what happened last season was a phenomenal performance, and how many teams ever go unbeaten for a whole year in any sport? So at this type of level, so it was an amazing achievement. But it then becomes like a history thing, and you can't, especially as a number of players had left. It wasn't like the same team rolled out there at the beginning of the season. And you have to look forward. You can't look backwards, all those other cliches and stuff. But yeah, I'd be lying if people didn't say, oh, how are you going to cope with trying to, well, you can't beat a perfect season. You can play better, but you might play better and still lose. So you have to start focusing on what you can do with that group. And as there were so many, the two major parts of the team from the year before had gone, and some of the more experienced people had gone. So there was a lot of younger players, and even the players that had been there before, their role had changed or was going to be changing significantly. And it's been a real positive to see how some people that had supporting roles, if that's the way to word it, last year became like major players like this year. I mean, the way it looks at the moment, we hopefully won't have as big a turnover of players because continuity is always important. So, yeah, there's no way that anyone would say that following a perfect season, how you deal with it, and you're not aware about it. But the other cliche is you can only really worry about the things you can affect, and I couldn't affect anything that was around that happened last year. So I think it was a case of looking back, and everyone should be ridiculously proud of what they did, and it's in the history books. It's written there that they didn't lose a game, and that should be, that you can't take that away from anybody that was involved in it on the court and off the court.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was crazy, but I think I seem to remember towards the end of that season, it became, almost like a negative, that it was like to try and get, to finish unbeaten at a certain point. It became like almost trying not to talk about it, but everyone wanted to talk about it, and it was kind of hung over everyone's heads a little bit. But
well, that is one of those things, isn't it? That it's all, again, the cliched stuff is that you can't think about that because you've just got to you got to play the guys in front of you, and that's it.
Yeah, next game, yeah.
And then it's one at a time, all that other stuff. But you can't think about 5 games to go. If we go unbeaten, it's great. It's like, well, I mean, because they had the game at Loughborough late in the season in that year where they went to overtime against a team that you wouldn't have, that wasn't going to be one of the teams that was going to challenge them. So but
Yeah.
young kids are quite dangerous in that sense. So that wasn't supposed to be the game that they might trip up, and they almost did. So
yeah, for sure.
You always have to just play the team in front of you.
Yeah. And fans look at it a bit differently, but there was a lot of chat in the groups and stuff around the whole, perfect season and stuff, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're anybody that's unfortunate enough to be an Arsenal fan when they were invincible and everything else, it's the same stuff, isn't it? Fans love that. It's a great thing to talk about,
Should we cut that bit out, Rish?
Yeah, we'll edit that out. We're not allowed to say the A word on it.
All right, okay. I did say for those people unfortunate enough to be.
Yeah, I did pick that up.
Another question from one of the fans is, what were your expectations when you took the role, and then in your first season, and do you feel you got where you wanted to with your expectations?
I thought we would win something at the start of the season. I thought that with the players we had, we would be competitive, and we were. But I came in a little bit, and I don't like the structure of the Division 1 season where people almost treat the trophy as pre-season. But Bradford surprised me. That was, and when we looked at the beginning of the year, I didn't think we were going to be losing to Bradford in the trophy. But expectation-wise, I thought we would be competitive. I didn't know how competitive we were going to be. I thought that as the season went on, I thought we were beginning to play in a way that was going to make us very competitive, because we had a couple of setbacks in the first half of the season, obviously losing away at Derby, where we could have lost heavily, but managed to get it into single digits. And obviously not making the trophy final, and then a cup exit. They were all setbacks, but it was, we learned every time we lost. So my expectations of us being competitive were, I still thought we were competitive. And then before Seth left, and because we obviously, Darian and Seth had a couple of games overlap, I thought we were playing the best basketball we played all year. In Seth's last game, we were just exceptional. And then again, I thought we'd got over the fact that Seth had gone, and we were changing the way we were going to have to play, because very good a player as TJ is, he's not the same type of player as Seth at all. So we had to change stuff. Sam had to take more responsibility. But then the overriding factor of the whole thing is that Akeem was just phenomenal all year until he got hurt. Mike Darlow describes him as a bit of a unicorn, as in, like, he's unique in lots of ways, and he's a very, very good level player. You don't play for your country in the Afrobasket qualifiers without being a good player, obviously. And then he does his ACL, and then you're like, how are we going to deal with that one? And there was a number of things that was an opportunity for Veron. So were my expectations met? I thought we were going to be competitive. We were. I thought we would win something. Did I think we would win it in the way we did? No, I thought that we wouldn't have to have last shot wins in the last two games. So were my expectations? Yeah, I thought we were going to be competitive. I really didn't know how competitive we were going to be. The only team that I really thought were going to be strong at the beginning of the year was Derby. I thought Derby were going to be the team that everybody had to beat, and it sort of turned out that way. Although they lost games they shouldn't have lost. And but apart from that, Division 1's a really competitive league this year. I mean, I think the product's very good. The level of player is good. But it was very competitive this year. I thought there were a lot of teams that, Bradford picked up some players and did a really nice job. They could have beaten anybody, and they did beat anybody on their day, sort of thing. So, and then they weren't even in the top four. So I think the depth of the league was good, which is good for the fans. Like, everyone sees games that are a little bit more close, and we have to find ways to win. And but back to the question, my expectations was we would be competitive, and we were. and down the end of the season, apart from, well, actually, to be fair, from Christmas. The only game off, we had the one game off at home against Bradford where we didn't play well at all, without a king, and then we had the loss at Essex. Apart from those two games, we were good in the second half of the season. So yeah, could we have done better if Akeem had been healthy? Maybe we wouldn't have dropped the game at Essex. Maybe we could have won the regular season, but they're like if onlys. And
yeah,
like you go back to the perfect season last year. I don't think you didn't. There was no injuries last year, and
No, nothing.
Mike Dallow tells me all the time that, oh man, we got for the whole season without an injury. And like this year, we've had injuries all over the place. I mean, the fact that I was amazed Braden came back and played in the final. I mean, that was tough of him to do that. But it looked like we were going to have to play the game without Braden and Akeem, which would have been extreme.
Yeah, we thought that
he's a
put a
tough
lot of
character,
work on
Braden.
Darren, wasn't it? If without both of them as well, and it's a lot to do with just one big in there.
Oh yeah, and Darian's a great level player, really good individual. But when he came back to us, he hadn't played much at all after like retiring from Leicester. And towards the end of the season, he was actually in practice looking really, like he sharp again. So and we were playing Reading in the final, so he seems to have a match up there that he enjoys. So but that would have been a tough ask for him to take that load on himself.
Talking to Darian, were you involved in us recruiting him, or did you know him already?
I knew Darian, but you have to give Mike Darlow all the credit for that.
We won't be doing that.
Okay.
He'll take it anyway.
No credit. No credit.
I mean, Mike is a bit of a cliche here because if you do cut him open, he is like that stick of rock that's got Hemel all the way through him.
Yeah.
So he's never taken a moment off of. If I don't get 5, 6, 7 messages from Mike every week about, oh, have you seen this player or that player, this player or that player, this player really worked well for us, etc., etc. And then in one of those, it was like, what do you think of Darian Nelson-Henry? I'm like, well, he's a really good player. Yeah, he's just playing local pickup, like in London. Why don't we approach him? I'm like, well, if you can pull that one off, then that's huge. So yeah, Mike needs. I know you guys won't give it to him, but Mike needs the credit for that one. Yeah, it was just that's. Well, it's a great pickup because one, he's a great player. Two, he's a really good. I don't get the impression, and we definitely haven't done this year, that we only recruit good people, and he's a really good person. And he's, in hindsight, where would we have been if we didn't recruit him?
Yeah,
if it was supposed to be, we were going to be really strong because we would have Darian and Akeem, and then rotation wise, Veron's doing a really nice job. Braden can play more at the 3, and we look great. And we never had that. We had that. I think we had that lineup on the floor once.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting what you said. In the 41-0 season, we had the same starting 5 for 40 of those games. Yeah. And obviously, you last season, or the season just finished, was a struggle to get the same starting 5 in maybe 8 to 10 games.
Yeah, and I suppose because we made this, and especially the fact that we made the decision early that we were going to go with both Seth and Sam in the back court, and then we lose one of those, and you're like, well, there's no one on the roster that's going to be giving us the same look. So, but we had Tez, and Tez can play any spot from 1 to 5, so that helped. But no, if we hadn't recruited Darian and we still had the same issue with Akeem, then we would have been in a hole.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's good to see Darren as you've mentioned there, as the season's gone on, you can definitely see why he was so successful in the BBL and what he did with Leicester. Like the guy, and to talk to him as well, he's just an all-round, top guy, and basketball knowledge and plays are just. I think in the final we were sat behind a bench, and I think you called him in for a timeout just before. I think it might have been at the end of Q3 or just as Q3 was finishing. And as you were just about to sit down, all you could hear is Darian talking. And he was just geeing the team up. Then you took over, and you could just tell like the respect he's got from the players as well. Yeah, I think he pushed us on a lot where we needed it.
Yeah, and I think that's he really added that as much as his ability to play. It was another leader in the group and a different type of leader to the people we had. So yeah, we should be. I know we are. I mean, it'll be a real priority to try, make sure he signs to play again next season.
And he could have easily been the MVP in the final, couldn't he? Could it.
Yeah, a lot of coaches will say they're not fans of MVPs because sometimes MVPs are normally too often given to the guy who scored the most points.
Yeah,
Sam or Darian, without a shadow of a doubt, did things across the stat line. And in some ways, Sam's picking up his third foul meant he spent enough time on the bench, so he was actually he wasn't gassed in the fourth, and he did a really nice job in the fourth quarter. But it's one of those things. The challenge for Sam there is that I've felt he's been capable of that level of performance throughout the whole season. He was He was really good in the playoffs. He needs to be really good. He needs to pick the season up from the start of next season where he finished it, and again, he'll be one of the leading players in the league. So yeah.
Is there anything that goes through your head in particular? We're standing on the sidelines 52 seconds into the playoff final and Sam's on 2 fouls. Is there anything that you kind of think you need to restructure, or do you just trust him to play his game?
You have to trust him. One of these, yeah. It's easier to answer that by saying that you could get very caught up in like, oh damn, what has he done? Why has he done that, etc. It's done, and how are you going to? And he's smart. I was surprised he actually picked his third up the way he did. If you can't trust your players, then you're in a bad place anyway. And if he said he was fine, and I was, unless he'd have said he needed to come out, I wasn't thinking of taking him out at all. The way we play defensively, we can, to an extent, hide him a little bit, but he's smart enough and experienced enough to know how to look after himself in that situation.
While we're talking about the playoff final, obviously, every time, so particularly in the first half, every time we got close to points with Reading, they kind of pulled away a bit again, and it was kind of, I think it was at the back end of Q3 and then early in Q4 where we went ahead for the first time. Was there anything in particular you changed, or was it a case of it was possibly stamina and we had the better stamina and therefore could push on in the last quarter?
The only part of the game I wasn't happy with was the way we started. We started a bit passively. And you're right, every time we closed the margin, they would make some shots. But as it went on, we had them deep on the shot clock an increasing number of times, and they ended up making a number of times the ball almost went loose and they'd pick it up and make a deep three. And because there was still plenty of time in the game, I fundamentally believed that we were wearing them down, and I thought that they wouldn't keep making that shot. But when you continue to get to 1 or 2 down, and then they open it back out to 7 or 8, 1 or 2 times they were up 8 with the ball, so they had a chance to go double digits. And I didn't. It's not so much a stamina thing. I did think that if we continued to play defensively the way we were, they would start to miss, and they did. And as the deeper the game did, their percentages went down. The only time that it wasn't really a massive concern, but when we sat Sam down for a lot of time in the third, we did have to change things, and so that Taylor became a little bit more dominant with the basketball and did a really nice job in that period of time. He got himself going as much as anything else. But while we kept going inside, I thought we were always gonna tick the scoreboard over. Apart from being disappointed the way we started the game, the only other time I got very disappointed in the game when we were up 5 and TJ tried to throw the alley-oop to Matt Disu on the break, and I'm like, why? in my own head anyway. I was like, why? Because if we make that, we're up 7, and we've literally just gone on something like an 11-4 run to go up 7. And they came down and made a 3, and all that work to go up 5 has just been dissipated. But we did, it was a great game. Everyone it was a tough game that they played really well in, but I just think the front line was really good, and Sam made good decisions. So going back to the previous question, Darian, the way he held the middle and the way he kept the scoreboard ticking over on the inside, could have been the MVP. But I think we had an advantage there, and our defense wore them down. So
yeah, because I think it felt like in the first half, in particular, Reading were hitting more of their threes.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the percentage was then, but when I looked at the end of the game, I was surprised by the fact they'd scored 10 threes and we'd scored 9 threes, because it didn't feel like it just from watching it felt like they were further ahead on that. But that's an example of us grinding them down defensively.
Yeah. I mean, they made a lot of, as I say, last quarter of the shot clock shots, be they long 2s or be they 3s. And that's always a pleasing stat. It's not like that they weren't looking to score early. They weren't trying to kill the game, because they do want to play up tempo, but we really did take them out of what they were trying to run, and they had to make big shots. And they weren't going to keep making those shots. Second half, our defense in particular, we didn't close out short. We always closed out long. Sometimes that looks like we're giving them penetration, but that's we want them to try and shoot it off the dribble. So they weren't going to carry on making those shots, and then we stopped Matt Clark enough. Basically, he played pretty well for them. Mitch Clark.
Yeah, they ended up with a few guys on 4 fouls, didn't they? And obviously he was fouled out during the fourth quarter as well. So that showed how the momentum had changed, I think, as well.
Yeah. Definitely with our defensive effort in the second half. Our defense was the way we have to play our defense. There are going to be times we give up some easy things, but the way we have to play our defense, field goal percentages are going to go down. And it was a championship game. As I say, if we'd have gone up 7 after getting out on the break, I think we'd have just that would have been the game. I think we'd have been in control. But yeah, we just about did enough, didn't we? Really.
But that's what a playoff. I mean, not from a coaching or fans perspective, but a playoff final should be a close game. I watched both of the men's games on the Saturday, and they were both like 20-point wins or something. It started off fairly even, and then sort of the other team would fade. So, but if you're a neutral watching a playoff game, then you want to see a close, entertaining game, and that you can't say that. All of our playoff games ended up kind of being that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why it was so disappointing that Basketball England didn't do a better job at putting people in the gym. I mean, that in front of a full house, that game would have been great. I mean, they've missed an opportunity there to sell Division 1.
It's interesting you say that,
comments
Mark.
after.
Yeah.
I'm
going to say exactly the same thing. I think you mentioned that in an interview afterwards about the lack of what do you think it is? Because that structure of like that whole weekend and the last game on a Sunday evening being that D1 final. What do you think they need to do?
Well, there's now 340 days, whatever it is, to next year's playoff final. Why aren't they advertised? Why aren't they pushed now? I know that you don't know who's going to be in it, but the BBL don't know who's going to be in their final. They still don't know who's going to be in their final, but the O2 is pretty much sold out.
Yeah, because
they sell tickets from the minute that the game before is finished. And say that if say everybody that comes to Hemel on a Saturday night every week, so 700 people or whatever. If 700 people are going to go to the game and Reading get 300 or 400 people, that's still only half the gym full.
Yeah.
And Manchester in particular is I think the number is within about an hour of the performance centre. There's 5-6 million people. Every school in Manchester plays basketball. what do they think? What do they think the BBL is doing? Like, do they think the BBL is like waiting to find out if Lions are going to go and we'll get 3,000 or 4,000 people from the Copper Box to go to the game once there's 18,000 people at the O2? So they sell tickets to people who want to watch basketball, and I think Division One is a product that Basketball England could do more with. But staging all the games there as well, there's that why, it's like, I'm on my soapbox. Sorry, it's like why was Division One women just the warm up game? They won't say that, but why was it just the warm up game to the Division One men? Why wasn't Division One women the main game on the Saturday? It should be. Or why wasn't Division One men the main game on Saturday and the other one on the Sunday? It's annoying that there is no benefit apart from winning the championship. There's no financial benefit. It actually costs the clubs who are successful money, and they get nothing for it. And even on top, the worst thing is that their TV production stuff is not bad now. It's good, reasonably good. It's they do a good job. How much better would it be for them to have like both sides of the arena packed?
Yeah.
It's like they stage 5 games. I mean, they don't. It's not an event, is it? It's not like the division, the basketball world in the UK. All right, the BBL is the big thing. Division One, it's like, I know it's different because it's football, but the playoff final for the spot from the Championship into the Premiership is an event.
Yeah.
The playoff Division One Championship game is not an event. It just happens to be played in Manchester, and that's wrong, I think. And that's it's my first year back working in a BE run environment, and there's a lot of good people in BE there, and they're losing a very good person in Gal Richards and stuff, but it probably cost us north of what, £2,000-3,000 to go and play in the game. Like, what incentive? It's like no sponsor for the league. It's supposed to be a professional league. Why would anyone want to sponsor something that looks like there's no one in the gym?
Yeah.
So there's more value. The people who run Hemel Storm value Hemel Storm. I don't think from the actions that Basketball England value the Division One playoff game in the same way we value the club that we play for, coach and support. And if you don't value it, why would anyone else value it? So it's really a frustration. It's why the women's teams formed the WBBL, because Basketball England didn't. The last cup final that they had before the WBBL, there was literally 10 people watching the game in Sheffield. I mean, what's the point?
Doesn't have to be like that. As you say, it's a product, right? And
yeah.
Why not? If they're not going to do it properly, why not let like this year? Why not have a best, like a 2-legged, or why not have a best of 3 series between Hemel and Reading?
Yeah.
That means there would be 900 people in Hemel on a Saturday night. There'd be 700 people in Reading if it's a 2-legged game, and there would be an atmosphere and there would be like real meaning to the game. But if they're not going to stage it, why do we all have to travel? I'd love to go to Manchester if it was an event.
Yeah, it's a great place, isn't it? It's just that buy it.
No, try and sell tickets.
I know you just talked about the football playoff, but I always think of the Premiership rugby playoff final at Twickenham. You know when it is for the following season. There's shirts from every club. There's people go for the last big event of the season. It doesn't matter who they support. And like you just said about that, it also feels like, I know with boxing, your main event is your last thing, but it feels like a Saturday afternoon, evening for your main game would attract more neutrals than a Sunday afternoon, evening, because everyone from Hemel, from Reading didn't get home till gone midnight on the Monday morning, so if you don't really follow over either of the teams, you're not going to travel miles to watch it on a Sunday afternoon.
No, everything you've just said is like really valid. In where's that conversation being had now? They've just had an event. Has anyone asked? I mean, I know obviously the Division One clubs meet and they talk about all sorts of things, but an event where and staging all those games in one place. I don't really understand the logic of it. Because if you're playing at 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, do you feel like you're in an event for the Division 3 or Division 2 women or Division 3 men? It's a really important game to those people. And it's a really important game. Should be a really important game for Basketball England. The women's Division 1 final, we were bad. Ours was bad enough. Tipping at 4 on a Sunday is tough. 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, you have no choice but to go the night before, which is going to cost you money. How many of you fans are going to get there for 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon in Manchester?
Yeah.
So it doesn't appear to me as though it's structured for the teams, or it's almost like it works administratively for Basketball England. Doesn't work. Yeah, we've staged there like this. It's a great event. The Junior Final Fours on over the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, why? I mean, I know it works in some ways, but making kids play games that close together, and also, yeah, it's supposed to be the end of the season. It's supposed to be the biggest event.
Yeah.
Making it a showcase. You're right. Well, hopefully that conversation's being had at some point, because it's been the same for a while, hasn't it? So
yeah, and the gaps in the league's only getting closer. If you look at some of the players that have gone up to BBL, some of the players that have dropped down into our league as well. Look at what Derby did in the trophy, not last season, the season before. The gap's getting closer. So if our league had the attendance and the focus on it that the BBL did, it's only going to improve the sport in the country and help build those academies. And it's just a knock-on effect everywhere, but it's just frustrating it doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah.
But,
well, you tell me who's responsible for it. I couldn't tell you who in Basketball England is responsible for commercially developing the Division 1 or the sport. I really don't know. So if I'm a potential sponsor, I don't even know who I pick the phone up to.
That's crazy.
Well, I think, that's a conversation we can really I could get talked to for hours talking about why the league should be better and clubs doing what they're not doing and what they should be doing. And it definitely deserves more attention on it. And the sport, it's growing, but just, the eyes aren't on it in the right place. But that's maybe a different podcast. We'll pick that one up on there.
That's a few hour long, that one, isn't it?
Just
I hope you'll feel better for that though.
Don't let me get on my soapbox about that stuff.
On a more positive note, then, Mark, obviously, great news this week. The club announced, obviously, you're back for a second season. Was that an easy decision based on the last game we've played and the season before, the people you work with?
Easy decision because of the club and the people. I could go on and on and on. Easy decision because the club is, I think I've said a few times, people would die for some of the stuff that Hemel do, because they're like the club is really special in that sense. Love working with the people. Love the coaching staff that I have. I just, the culture, as much as anything, I'm a big culture person. The culture of the organisation is really good, and we can win. I think we're going to be tough to beat next year if we do the job we're supposed to do over the summer. So we're supposed to start where we finished, not go back. So it was not a difficult decision. It was a difficult decision in terms of, does it work in terms of making the commitment that you need to make and how it works personally. But there was not a debate about, is it a good decision to go back at all.
That's great to hear.
It seems like a bit more.
We've done
a bit more around the recruitment this year as well. Yeah, sorry, Rich. A bit more around the recruitment this year as well. You're going to be a bit more involved in that, because obviously I think you probably missed out on that last summer.
Yeah, and I think the conversations we've had so far, I think, because if you can secure the best local British players, retaining the best British players, get that resolved, trying to find a way of dealing with Hakeem's situation, where obviously I think the club should try and find a way, as long as he gets back healthy, to get commitment from him and the club commit to him. Because to find permit players is a little bit easier than finding quality homegrown, and I think we've got a really nice base of homegrown and British qualified players. So we've already made one exciting signing, and I think that the releases and stuff will go out on those things as they happen. But we've still got 2 permit spots to fill, so I'm excited about the roster we have, and we've still got two permits to fill. So again, credit to Mike Darlow. I know you knocked that straight away, but credit to Mike again because of the link with the university and the way the University of Hertfordshire is becoming so much more involved, and it's much more benefit to them and more benefit to Storm that we're working much closer with them. So if you look at the contribution of Matt and Cavell as the season went on, that became really important. So and I think that's useful for the University of Hertfordshire. So that works. That get that developed more is important. We need to be deeper. So I'm obviously I'll be more involved, but Mike does a great job. JB does a great job. JB does that. JB likes dealing with agents, so he can deal with agents. He enjoys that. I don't mind talking to agents, but I quite like having very specific conversations. So no, I'm really positive about it. I think we're in a really good place right now, and the number of people who would love to come and play for Hemel is really good. So you just got to pick the right people.
That's great. That's great. It also feels like there's a lot of going on in terms of for the future in that second season for the women's team.
Yep.
You mentioned the Bucks team, but I know there's some talk about the juniors and stuff like that as well. So it's kind of feels like quite an exciting time for the whole organisation.
I know, and the great thing about it is you got the infrastructures there that it's really hard to run good junior programs. They're expensive, but the infrastructure's there, and it's the natural thing to happen coming out of the sort of junior development stuff and the work in the schools. It's the natural thing to happen, and there's enough basketball in Hemel schools and Hertfordshire schools that won't take a lot to get a really good level. So no, I think the club, it's an exciting place to be. Someone can find us a big warehouse somewhere and we can kit it out and do that type of stuff. Then but taking care of what you can take care of is what obviously the club does very well.
For sure.
I think we've got a few more fans questions that came in, Mike, haven't we?
Yeah, some interesting ones. I think my favourite one we had from a member of your coaching team, Mark. If you were to play an old school playground game of Snog, Marry, Avoid between Tom, Jake, and Mr. Darlow.
I think I might have to claim the amendment on that one. I don't know if I could choose. Let's just say with interesting selection. Let's just leave it at that. We'll be able to do anything. Mike will be on messages to someone. Tom will be solving the world's problems, and Jake will be off doing all sorts. So they'll never be in the same place for long enough. There you
go. We'll say that. No prizes for guessing which one of your staff submitted that question either. But
you know who it is. Yeah, it runs in his family. Just runs in his family. There you go.
Another question we had come in, Mark, was what was your first impression of the Storm fans when you first got into the Storm Dome for your first home game?
My first impression was that my overriding impression right from the beginning was that the gym is passionate throughout the whole game. And it got worse or better depending on your perspective as the season went on. As in, passion. It's passion. There's passion in the gym with the fans, and it's knowledgeable passion. I don't know if that's a contradiction, but that was my. But that wasn't a surprise because every time, even if I go back in history of when I've been to Hemel as an opposing team, it's always been noisy. It's always been loud. It's always been passionate. And so passionate was always the impression I had initially. and that passion just got bigger and bigger. It appeared to get bigger and bigger over the season. We had some big nights and big games, and there were people living it on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Sometimes not always outside the sidelines, but there you go.
There's no one on this podcast that's ever crossed that line, is there?
No. There's no one on this podcast. But
Oh, sorry, guys, I went through a tunnel.
Yeah.
And another question that came in was, if you could replay this season that we've just had, is there anything that you would change?
Akeem's injury. And
it's an obvious one, I think,
and Seth not leaving, even though we picked up TJ, but like Seth not leaving, because we were in a great place. By the time Darian had joined, Seth was about to leave. We were in a great place as a group and as a team, and the group was a very different group without Seth in it. And I'm big on the culture of the group, and he was important to the culture of the group. But Akeem's injury, geez, I mean, I hate people getting injured. Like, my daughter's done both her ACLs, and I know how long that rehab can be. I think his will be relatively straightforward, but it's still going to be months.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if I was going to stop anything, I'll change anything, it would have been it would be that.
It's interesting you mentioned Seth. I think his step up from last season to the role this season was unbelievable. He just really was, always was like quite vocal on the court, but really a leader, isn't he? He's really a great guy as well.
And he went through an interesting process of understanding how he could really help the team, as well as get him stuff for himself, which would help the team. And that when it clicked with him, it clicked with the whole group. And it's just a flat out good person as well. So I think that was difficult for the group to adjust to. And as great a player as TJ can be, it's not. I'm not saying anyone's worse or better. He was just different, and therefore is a different dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, everyone around Hemel was delighted to have TJ back. Sad to see They're delighted to have TJ back, but as you say, different players.
Yeah.
Any more questions, guys, before we get onto our last one?
I think we've covered all the fan ones, and just the last couple of routine questions to all the guests.
So one we ask all of the guests, and they pretty much all give the same answer, is what's your favorite basketball movie?
Am I to assume that their favorite basketball movie is Coach Carter? Then is it?
We can't confirm or deny.
My favorite basketball movie is what is it? Hoosiers. Actually,
yes, a different one. PJ said that, I think, didn't he, when he was on last year? But predominantly they say Coach Carter. Yeah.
No, Hoosiers would be a pure basketball movie. Especially as it's pretty much related around the coaching side as much as anything else. But yeah, really good film. And obviously Space Jam's a classic. So
not Space Jam.
No one's really mentioned that. No one's really mentioned that as a top choice. It's always Coach Carter or eventually Hustle. A few people go down with the more recent one.
Yeah. Good film. But come on, yeah. How can you not mention Space Jam as
it's a very good shout.
We did say at some point we were going to go back through our podcasts and see how many people had said Coach Carter. I think one person listed nearly every basketball film was ever made, but we were going to try and keep a tally.
Actually Darian went through all of them and still didn't pick one.
Yeah, right. So obviously he's been a pro for so long. He's got too much time in his hands.
Yeah.
Do you have an NBA team as well? Which is another question I think we ask everyone. Do you follow NBA much? Or
I follow the NBA. I wouldn't say I follow it in any sort of great detail, but I was bigger into the NBA when the Lakers were the Lakers. So it was always the Lakers and the Celtics, and so you're either a Laker or a Celtic fan. So I was a Laker fan, even though Larry Bird is one of my favorite players of all time. But I was always Pat Riley was a great coach. The Lakers were that era were a great team. So yeah, I have to, if someone puts me on the spot, I have to say I'm a Laker fan.
Nice. Yeah, good history there. I like that.
Great stuff.
I think is that a wrap, guys?
That's a wrap from
Yeah,
my side.
absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks
Just
very
Just
much
safe
for
to
your time,
say
Mark.
thanks
It's
so
been a
much,
pleasure.
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your time. It's been great
No,
chatting to you.
anytime you need anything, just let me know.